Good evening and welcome to the guitar, from the bowstring to the 21st century. If you've been watching our past few segments, you will recognize that melody as the tune that we've opened the show with and closed the show with each segment. It is by Miguel Llobet. It is his harmonization of a very popular old Catalan folk melody. The title is El Noi de la Mar. Miguel Llobet is an interesting composer. He is better remembered for his arrangements of Catalan folk tunes and for his actual compositions. He passed away during the Spanish Civil War, probably about 1937. People ask me often, what is a classical guitar? They will say to me, acoustic guitar has steel strings, children's guitars have nylon strings. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Quite often they will put nylon strings on a children's guitar because they're a little easier on the fingers than steel strings. However, there was a time when steel strings did not even exist. Neither did nylon strings. Way back, before there was nylon or steel used for strings, they used gut. Gut came from animals. Often you've heard people refer to catgut for violin strings. Well, they may have used catgut at one point for something. However, when you think of the size of a cat and the size of a guitar, lamb is what was used, or sheep. The process was quite simple, really. They would take the gut and clean it, soak it in water and alkaline, and then take strands and twist them on a drying rack. Depending on the number of strands would determine the size of the string, whether it was a thin string or a thicker string. And at that point, the strings were left to dry. And then, when they were dried and twisted together solidly, they would be taken from the rack, polished, and then given to the musicians to use. Gut strings were used on classical guitars until probably the mid-1800s. Then people started using steel strings because steel was more accurate. Steel string, it's not troubled by humidity, it's not troubled by temperature. Also, gut strings can just snap on you at any given moment, so it always makes performing with them a little bit dicey. So steel came along. It's a little easier to tune, maintain tuning. They don't freak out when the temperature goes up or down or the humidity gets too high or too low. But they lend a different tone quality to the instrument. A steel string gives you the fundamental pitch, but there are a lot of overtones, which gives the steel string its shimmer and shine rather than, the nylon string has a very warm, focused sound where the steel string just has more overtones and more shimmer and sheen. Anyway, that's the best way I can describe it. So because of this, there was an argument in the classical guitar school whether or not one should use steel strings or one should use gut strings still. And it was quite a fierce argument, and there's been many fierce arguments in the classical guitar world, which we will talk about a little bit. So what happened is that you had the two schools of thought, gut strings, steel strings. Second World War came along and nylon was developed. Now nylon is wonderful for the classical guitar because it has much of the same tonal qualities of the gut. However, it also has some of the benefits of steel in that it doesn't just snap on you at any wrong moment. They stay durable for quite a while. Also, they stay in tune a lot better than gut. Not quite as well as steel stays in tune, but they stay in tune a lot better. So what happened is that over the course of years since the Second World War, most guitar players now play on nylon strings. However, and this is a very big however, if you have a guitar player who owns an instrument that was built prior to the Second World War, a lot of times the instrument was not built for the added tension that nylon strings will put on it. These players will often like the sound of gut and buy the gut strings. And also, because the instrument was designed for gut, well, some say it's a better choice, more authentic. In my way of thinking, gut has so many drawbacks that I would rather go with a lighter nylon string on a Torres 1870 guitar, let's say, than run the risk of all the pitfalls of gut. When I purchased a Ramirez in 1976, it came from the factory with gut strings, which I played with for about a day and then cut them off and put some nylon strings on. Anyway, that's the story on strings. Another great argument that has been raging in the classical guitar world probably for the last 100 years is whether or not to use right-hand fingernails or just use the flesh of the fingers to pluck the strings. Now, the thing is that with your fingernails, you have greater volume. I believe you have more focused pitches. In other words, if I play with the fat of my finger, it sounds like that. If I put the nail into it, it's a little brighter, maybe a little brittle. However, one can adjust for that. I'm just trying to show, the extreme range of things here. But the problem with your fingernails is if you're not blessed with strong nails, they will break all the time. Plus, even if you are blessed with strong nails, you can do like I did yesterday and jam it into a doorknob and break it off. And I'm using a fake nail on one finger right now, on my thumb. So, weighing these things into the balance, guitar players who say, well, I play music that was written in the 1800s, and nobody used fingernails back then, so I'm not going to use my fingernails. That's a very legitimate argument. They play on gut strings with just the pads of their fingers. Well, they're going to have a very, very quiet sound. They're not going to be able to fill a large room at all.